Hi, I'm Caits, coming to you from my pandemic-era studio, complete with still wet hair for authentic purposes. I am here to talk to you a little bit today at the request of my good friend Katie Rainey for the Young Women's Leadership School of Queens about making poetry comics. I may also share this video with other people, but for the record, it is first and foremost for you girls. Okay, so Katie showed you that I recently put out a comics zine. I started making this really as a way to find some joy and creative output that wasn't connected to an ambition, that really spoke to a younger version of myself that would all day sit in my bedroom and just make things. And what I made were zines, which are, this one's not, but the originals are, photocopied on a nice library printer, and they're full of art and writing in the do-it-yourself tradition, meaning you're not waiting for someone to publish you, you just make it happen. So this is all what I made in high school. This is one issue. Here's another one. And if you really want to see what I was like at 15, there's a comic of me with a mohawk, okay? So maybe you might be ready now to start.
So the first rule is no rules. How freeing. You can really use any instruments. My favorite to use is the Le Pen brand of drawing marker with a fine tip, which means I have to color in all those black areas for a long time. That's okay with me. And just a simple mechanical pencil. I also have the ones you can get at the pharmacy. They're very simple tools. You can use computer paper, you can use anything. It's really, your wildest imagination works, okay? I've made comics with everything and anything. So for example, you can see here that in this comic that the text was added on the computer later, but it's also collage. These are different drawings put together with some textured paper underneath. It's on just some old construction paper I had lying around. So it ends up getting this this different effect of the cut and paste style than if I just drew one panel. It also means if you make a mistake, you can fill it in, potentially. And you can see here that this was added on for length later, and then scanned and the text was put in. Now, if you don't have ability to use Photoshop or Illustrator, or don't understand computer programs, or don't care to use them, you could always, cut out the text or write it in here, and then if you don't have a scanner, just take a photograph. I also wanted to show you some of these. These are cutouts made with an X-Acto knife from just plain construction paper. You can get it stapled. You can see some glue marks there from where I glued it down. That's my face. And all of these separate pieces, there's my husband's face, I ended up scanning into the computer, making them into an image on Adobe Illustrator. There are plenty of tutorials online about how to do that if you're curious, if you have access to the tools. If not, you could always cut these out, right? Instead of gluing them down where they were to scan, I could have arranged them on the paper and snapped photos. But I have the tools because I do, so I could. And all these separate images, I just wanted to show you how they all look apart, because here's what they became together. They became this comic once I put them in the computer. And I added text, and I brought the different images to live in the same space, and the poem came together through that. So I always start with the writing. This is a little panel I drew on the subway one day for fun. It says, "I'm so alive today it's annoying. Where's the magic beanstalk at? I want to shimmy up its torso into beyond the sky. I want to ride a cloud over this city home to you." Clearly I was sick of commuting that day. And the text for me is a real grounding place, and then I can vision around it. And sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 starts. Sometimes I have to start a comic and then put it down for a long time before I come back to it because I just don't know what to draw. And the text is the anchor. I'm sure you could do it the other way around. Many people draw based on images. Write based on images. And there's a whole history of doing that called ekphrastic poetry when it's specifically not your own work that you're responding to. But for comics and illustration, you'll play with it. But I think starting with text is going to be helpful for you, especially if you're starting out. The third thing I want you to think about is how the text and the image interplay, right? It can be really literal, or it can be really abstract. So here's New York Strange, for example, but there's no text in this one, so I'm actually not going to use it. Let's take this summertime comic excerpt. So the words are: seeing your love be a brother, a frustrated brother, a good brother, seeing a family, a good family, a family that loves through all the cracks that let the rain in, think have I been a good daughter, a good sister. So here you see that it doesn't say a good brother making music, a good brother cooking eggs, a good brother having difficult conversations. But it does add a layer of narrative to the text that wasn't there. So it does give us some story as to what being a good brother actually looks like. And then in the next panel, sometimes it looks almost verbatim what's happening. The thought catches up on the subway during a passage about a courageous sister in a memoir, and the tears hold at the brim, counting down from 50 until they retreat from where they came. Here's the person reading the book, but here's an added detail of someone looking at her like, what's going on with you? Maybe with some empathy. Who knows what this guy's doing, right? So you have a chance to add a new piece to the story that's not seen. And then there's a possibility of doing things that are much more abstracted. For example, in this comic, the poem talks about really seeing your own beauty and understanding that nobody can take that from you if it's in your mind. So, of course, that requires some abstraction. Now, the image in the poem talks about a tiny bird of your spirit underfoot, radio fuzz, right? But instead I drew a young woman holding herself, dreaming of starfish, moving towards a city landscape. So this is not a direct representation, but opens up some possibility, right, for what the poem is not saying, what room there is left. Of course, also with a project like New York Strange, I do typically try now, I didn't start this way, but I do typically try to use this long form. I cut Bristol board, and I do typically tend to draw them in the order they appear, although some things obviously change when they go into the computer. I'm also not pulling them in the order they appear, and I add text online as well. And then I really think about unifying elements. So a unifying element for New York Strange is these sort of hanging clothesline images. And this one was for a coronavirus edition. So you see all these different gloves and masks, boxing gloves. I always try to get a little goofy. Skeleton costume. And here are from the first issue and the second issue. And this one is forthcoming, so you'll see that one down the line. You also don't have to draw well or draw at all. These are all different styles of some people I pulled. Now, arguably, they can draw, yes, but everyone has their own unique look, and I think that's what's really important. So this is from a book called Hot Comb by Ebony Flowers. That's really fantastic. This is Linda Berry. She's a classic comic artist and novelist. These are not poem comics, but I think reading other kinds of comics are really helpful when thinking about what's possible. And Linda Berry's amazing, and she has a couple books about making comics that really speak to this point. Oh, there's a Christmas card from my sister. And Linda Berry's style is very wacky and wild and fun. And she talks a lot about kids' drawings having a lot of energy. So there's an original kids' drawing, and there was her trying to imitate it. There's so much life in children's work, and we see it and think, wow, that's so fresh and incredible. Even Picasso has a quote that is, wow, amazing. Roughly paraphrased, saying that he, spent 20 years studying and then the rest of his career trying to unlearn what he'd learned to really get back to that raw essence of drawing like he did as a child. So I think really trusting yourself is a huge part of the battle. It's impressive to see people can draw realistically, but to me, I'm not very interested in that. I'm interested in the character you bring to the page, in what you really have to say visually and with your words in the combination. So permission to just give it a shot. And this is, if you're really interested in making comics, I highly recommend this book because it will help you see all of these points and give you some tips. And this is just a really favorite current book of mine, Pleading with Stars, Kurt Ankeny. And I love now he can really draw, but I love his different approaches and styles as well. He really switches up what it looks like in each comic in this book, and they're quite beautiful. And lastly, I'll show you this book, A Softer World, which came out a number of years ago, and I actually used it with 7th graders in a class I taught who did their own poems and haikus with photographs. So you don't even have to draw at all. You can take photos, right? Or you can even find them online. If you find them online, you're either going to want to make sure you credit them, or there are free photo archives all over the internet as well. If you just search royalty-free photos, you can find whole banks. So you can always take these royalty-free photos other people have taken for you, and for free, manipulate them into comics with images. Cool. I want you to write a haiku or just a 3-line poem, something very short. Write a short piece of text, or take a piece of text you've already written, 3 lines, and draw 4 panels. That does not have to be good. See how messy mine is. You can also use the table function in something as simple as Microsoft Word to create one that has really straight lines if that's important to you. Again, to me, I love imperfect. Imperfect equals good. I want you to choose a line for 3 boxes. Could be these 3, could be these 3, could be these 3. And those you're going to add words and text. And then the 4th box, I want to be only visuals. What can you add to the story of your poem that's not already in there? I want you to also think how each box is going to illustrate the lines. Are you going to do it very literally? Are you going to do something a lot more abstract? Are you going to add a detail that's not in the text that you're revealing to the reader? So really think about, how do you represent this? How do you bring it to life? And I want you to experiment. And you can try to do this exercise 3 different times with different imagery. In fact, let's add a 5th part of the assignment. Whoa, as I lose you. 5. Make 3 versions. Can be with different mediums that you draw with, could be collage for one, could be just different imagery you're creating. And I want you to really give that a shot and see how it goes. And I would love to see it if you want to send it to me. Just a hint. Okay. I know there are so many others, and I hope you send me some, but here are some possible people and places to start with for inspiration. That's me. Bianca Stone is someone I learned from, who's incredible in poetry comics. Lauren Halderman, Kelsey Parker Ervick, Gabrielle Bates, Naoko Fujimoto. The Poem Brute section of 3M magazine is very abstract if you're interested in that route. And then these 2 places are now no longer functioning, but they have great archives. The Poetry, their comics section, and Ink Brick, which is all poetry and comics. And Rhino Magazine has great graphic book reviews brought together by Naoko. So here's just a place to start, and I hope you send me more ideas.